Good evening, everyone. We've had a couple speakers that got stuck in traffic behind an accident that I guess was big enough to make everything slow down. So we'll be starting in a few minutes. So just hang on tight and get ready to start taking your seats. So when we do start, we can start as quickly as possible.
And they're all turned off right now.
They're on. People come up.
So, sing the national anthem, you're going to come up here. I'm going to have them use this microphone here. And when he sees you, pick it up so that when they do that, then you're going to tell them. Okay.
Mom's gonna count us in.
Then you guys will come over. Here's my question. This is what I want to do. When they come up and present the action, you guys stand over here.
I'm good. Is this on? Awesome. Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to this beautiful location. We are so excited to be here tonight representing Moms for Liberty. It's my understanding there's been a bit of an accident on the road, so we may have some people joining us in a bit, but we're going to go ahead and get started right now. Thank you for joining us at the Giving Parents a Voice Town Hall in Raleigh, North Carolina. My name is Tiffany Justice. I'm the co-founder of Moms for Liberty. We are a nonprofit grassroots organization. We started in January of 2021 with 2 chapters, and we are now in 48 states with over 300 chapters and over 130,000 members. It's very exciting to be here with you. Tina Deskovich and I, the other co-founder of Moms for Liberty, served on school board. And during COVID, we were on that school board, and we saw mics being cut off. We saw the National School Board Association send a letter to the Department of Justice, and within 5 days, Merrick Garland was issuing a statement saying that parents should be considered to be domestic terrorists in some cases by the premier law enforcement agency of the United States, the FBI. And when those mics were shut off, Tina and I said, we need to give parents a microphone. We need to give elected leaders and policymakers a microphone. This is our effort to do that. The change that needs to happen in America needs to happen in every backyard. We are so excited to bring leaders together tonight, people that are actually making a difference in their communities. After our panels, we'll bring all of the panelists back up on stage to answer questions. But first, I'd like to open up the evening with some recognitions and acknowledgement. The first people I'd like to acknowledge are those currently serving on school board or a school board candidate. Tonight, it's my understanding, you can stand for a moment. We'd like to be able to recognize you. Michael Logan, who is a school board member in Greensboro. Natasha Tu, school board candidate in New Hoover County. Sean Strain, a previous school board member. And if you have run for school board, are currently serving, or have previously served, thank you very much for engaging in such a meaningful way in our children's education. School board is one of the most important positions in America, an area that has been ignored for too long. You are on the front lines right now in the middle of this culture war, this cultural revolution that we find ourselves in. Thank you so much for stepping up to serve our students. Next, I would like to recognize elected officials that are in the audience. Melissa Merrell is a former Union County School Board member and a current county commissioner. Michelle Morrow is running for state superintendent of the Department of Public Education. Stacy McGinn running for North Carolina Senate District 49. Matthew Corden is running for North Carolina House District 11. And Isaiah Payne is running for North Carolina House District 99. And Julie Van Hayden, I hope I pronounced that correctly, is a current state House rep. Thank you so much for coming today. Next, I would like to recognize this beautiful location, the Wake County Shrine Club, for allowing us to hold our event here tonight. I'd like to recognize Julie Page and Scott Rose for their specific contributions to this event. Additionally, I'd like to recognize Brooke Weiss and Becky Hobbs for their behind-the-scenes efforts to make this evening such a success. Now, we are going to give you a view of how we open up our chapter meetings around the country. We begin each meeting with the national anthem or the pledge, an invocation, and a Madison minute. Tonight, we have a special treat. The colors will first be presented by Sanderson High School Junior ROTC. And the national anthem will be sung by Victoria, who is 11 and in 5th grade, and Caitlin, who is 12 and in 6th grade. Both are students in the Wake County Public School System. The invocation will be given by Wake County Chapter Chair Becky Hobbs. That will then be followed up by Abigail Prado, Union County Chapter Chair, who will give the Madison Minute. The Madison Minute is typically a quote from a founding father or mother, or someone involved in the establishment of this country. It could be a quote from a founding document like the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, or a supporting document like the Federalist Papers, a written letter or a published article. This is a great reminder of our founding principles. I ask you now to please rise for the presentation of colors and remain standing for the invocation.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose bright stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet waved o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Let's bow our head in prayer. Almighty Father, thank you for gathering us together tonight. We ask that your will be done. Let us have an open and honest conversation about our children and their education and our rights as families. In Psalm 127, it says, "Children are the heritage of the Lord, the fruit of the womb." Our children are a blessing, and in that, Lord, I ask that you bless the panelists with your wisdom as we have an open and honest conversation about our children. Also, your word in Proverbs says to train up a child in a way that he will go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And that is why it's important to have this conversation, Lord. So I ask for all of us here that you open our hearts and our minds to your wisdom. Let us speak in honesty and truth. Let us find common ground as we seek what is best for our children. We give to you all the praise and honor and glory. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
You may now be seated.
tonight's Madison Minute, I chose a quote by James Madison. "The advancement and diffusion of knowledge is the only true guardian of liberty." Public education is a fundamental American principle. In 1647, over 100 years before America would win its independence and establish itself as a nation, the Puritan settlers passed the Old Deluder Satan Act. It was the first education-based law passed in the colonies, and it would later become the foundation of our American public school system. The premise of this law stated that all children must be taught to read and write proficiently. The Puritans believed that any person who could read and interpret the scriptures for themselves would be sufficiently armed to defend themselves from the deceptions and temptations of the devil. Thus, they believed that education was the key to creating intelligent individuals with a strong moral foundation. This plan worked. A century later, this simple and effective educational system produced America's founding fathers, arguably one of the most intelligent, well-read, and articulate generations our country has ever known. This is not the education system that we have in place today. As everyone in this room knows, our schools, our whole education system has been captured. Our children are not being taught to read, not being taught to write, and they're not being taught to think critically. Over 54% of Americans who have graduated from public schools cannot read at a 6th grade level. Our children are being taught to hate America, to hate the Christian values and the principles of liberty that America was founded upon. Some children are being taught that they are victims who will never be able to succeed in life due to an oppressive social hierarchy. Some are being taught that they are oppressors who should hate themselves for the wrongs their ancestors have committed. And some children are being taught that they were born in the wrong body and their only chance at happiness is to medically and surgically mutilate their healthy bodies. Our children are not being educated. They are being indoctrinated. My oldest daughter began kindergarten in August 2020 during the height of the COVID-19 hysteria. She was only allowed to attend in-person school 1 day a week, and she was required to do virtual schooling on the other 4 days. At 6 years old, she was required by law to wear a mask for the majority of her 8-hour school day. As her mother, I was not allowed inside the school. On her first day of in-person schooling, I dropped her off at the front entrance. She was taken inside by a staff member whose name I did not know, to a classroom that I had never seen, and placed with a teacher whom I had never met. As a mom, I felt completely overwhelmed. I knew there were massive problems in our public school system, and I had no idea how to fix them. I didn't even know where to start. Joining Moms for Liberty has changed my life. This organization has given me the tools and the knowledge that I needed to stand up and advocate for my children. We have organized from a group of frustrated and overwhelmed parents into an organization of informed and empowered parents who have fought tooth and nail to better our public schools. With Moms for Liberty, I have found a community, and in this community, I have found hope. With all of us parents fighting together, it is possible to take back our public schools. In order to save our children, in order to save our country, we must first save our schools. The advancement and diffusion of knowledge is the only true guardian of liberty. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abigail. Now we would like to show you a short video about Moms for Liberty. Some of you may know a lot about us. Maybe some of you are hearing about us for the first time. So we'll play this video and then we'll jump into our panels.
We are joyful warriors. We are going to fight like hell for the future of this country with a smile on our face because our children are watching. Our members build relationships, spread truth to educate their communities, and empower parents to do the same. That is the power of parents.
Moms for Liberty were founded by two moms who turned their mission of transparency in schools into a movement that was so powerful, they were called domestic terrorists. This year's MVPs, most valuable patriots, the founders of Moms for Liberty, Tina Deskovich and Tiffany Justice.
But we want to be clear, we are accepting this on behalf of over 130,000 moms and dads across America.
So I came here to say enough. We have a crisis in America in public education. It takes everybody in this state and in this country to care about this issue. Media, step up. Cover the fact that we are in a literacy crisis. This is the future of our kids and our country.
Moms for Liberty had a town hall here in New York City. Council members, city council members here, and some assemblymen and women were trying to shut this thing down.
Under the guise of literary value, these adults are advocating for the sexualized grooming of children.
And that our parental rights have been revoked through the effort of leftist politicians.
In support of the parental rights bill, these rights are not given to us by the government. They are endowed to us by our Creator.
What is your right to tell a parent who wants their child, who might feel seen by this story?
If a child feels seen by this story, that means that they have been the victim of a predator.
The radical left is even slandering Moms for Liberty as a so-called hate group. You're a hate group. You hate your children. You hate everybody. You're a hate group. I'm telling you, these people are sick. But Moms for Liberty is no hate group. You are joyful warriors. You are fierce, fierce patriots. You're not the threat to America. You're the best thing that's ever happened to America.
We have the fundamental right given to us by God to raise our children, to direct their upbringing, their education, their moral and religious upbringing. And once we let the government get in between us and our children, our families are done. Our country is at risk.
Thank you for watching that. You can see we take our jobs as moms, as Americans, very seriously, and we appreciate you all being here tonight for this town hall. We're going to start with our first panel now. This is a group of people that have run for office, that have served in office, that perhaps are working in advocacy and policy. We're going to start with Summa. Mary is the General Counsel for North Carolina Values. She is a wife and mother of 5 children. Sure, Mary, come on up. She graduated from law school in 1984 and served as staff attorney on the Separation of Powers Subcommittee of the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee. She served as chief legislative assistant to Senator Jesse Helms, working on social issues including life, family, women's and children's issues, pornography, AIDS, and Title IX. After leaving the Senate, Mary returned to her hometown of Charlotte, North Carolina, where she served as a prosecutor for the 26th Judicial Circuit. She served on 4 national platform committees at the RNC, where she worked closely with Phyllis Schlafly in preserving pro-life and pro-family provisions in the platform. She has authored over 30 articles on pro-life and pro-family issues, served as assistant professor at Belmont Abbey College, where she taught criminal justice and government classes. Mary is the recipient of more numerous prestigious awards that I could possibly mention right now, and we are thrilled that she has joined us this evening. Next up is Susie Cole. Susie Cole is an instructor with the National Institute of Learning and Development. She is also the Discovery Center Director of the Salem Baptist Christian School in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Susie helps to bring out and unfold the full potential of every child in the classroom, including children with exceptionalities, specifically students with exceptionalities. And we're very excited that Susie has joined us this evening. Thank you, Susie. Kenny Xu has a book tonight that you can pick up called School of Woke. He's an author. He is also the founder and runs Color Us United, which is advocating for a race-blind America. Right now, they are tackling specifically DEI in medical schools. We are thankful for that. But Kenny is going to tell us a little bit about his 2 years of research uncovering how CRT and DEI are destroying meritocracy in American public education. Finally is County Commissioner Melissa Merrell from Union County. I have been told I will love her accent this evening. Melissa was a no-nonsense advocate for children in her time on the Union County School Board from 2014 to 2022. So Melissa also had the beauty and the pleasure of serving on school board during COVID. Super fun. And because of that and what she saw happen in Union County, she ran for school board, for county commission, excuse me. Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson appointed her to the K-12 Education Facts Task Force in 2021 to support students, parents, and teachers across North Carolina. Thank you for joining us tonight, Melissa. Mary. So that way I can turn and see everybody. That would be wonderful. Thank you. So we're going to, let's see, is that on? Can you hear me? Okay. We're going to do a little state of the state of North Carolina. About 85% of students in North Carolina attend traditional or charter schools. In North Carolina, a third of your state budget is spent on education. And let's look at what some of those outcomes are. The NAEP scores, the National Assessment for Educational Progress, our nation's report card, had fourth grade students, 35% of fourth grade students proficient in math and only 32% proficient in reading. By eighth grade, that number drops to 25% proficient in math and 26% proficient in reading. And yet somehow in North Carolina, you have an 88% graduation rate, higher than the national average. My goodness, let's start with you, Melissa. How does this happen? How do you have 25% of students reading on grade level in eighth grade and yet 88% graduating in the state of North Carolina?
So I know, is this working? You got it. Okay. So I can speak specifically for Union County. Not sure that I can speak for the whole state, but I know in Union County, if there are students that are not meeting their EOGs for reading, math, math 1, science, biology, they will remediate those students. And there was a time when they would let them retake the test. But I know as far as graduation rates, they work very hard behind the scenes to get those numbers up. In Union County, the graduation rate is 93%.
93%. So Mary, North Carolina values. I was told that you could not do a town hall in North Carolina if you did not invite North Carolina values. Our moms and dads have told me that your organization has been key to making progress. So Mary, tell us a little bit about North Carolina values.
NC Values was started in 2011 by a woman named Tammy Fitzgerald. She's still the executive director. It was started really around the marriage amendment. That's what really galvanized her to start this organization. It's dedicated to preserving life, parental rights, and families. Parental rights is the mortar that holds those families together and protects them from government, and also religious liberty. And so we advance those goals through policy, through elections, and through the courts. And so I'm the general counsel. Do you want me to talk a little bit about what we've done the last session?
Sure, absolutely. Let me just mention that. So we'll get to Kenny and Susie in 1 second. But it's my understanding that your governor vetoed a number of bills that your legislator passed this past session. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, when Tricia Cotham saw the light and became a Republican, it changed the game for us because we had an agenda that included a pro-life bill, the Save Women's Sports bill, which we had tried for several years to get passed, and the other one that I really worked hard on was a gender bill that banned puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, surgery, gender changing surgery for minors. And those were 3 of maybe 7, but those are the ones that we were heavily involved in because we're the only organization in North Carolina that's a policy organization that does drafting, briefing books, issue briefs, lobbies, holds the hands of legislators as they're carrying these bills through the legislature, is there for the press releases, the days of action, bringing people to come in and testify. We're the only organization in North Carolina that does it from start to finish. And so we were proud that we were part of the passage of the Save Women's Sports bill, the gender affirming care bill, the pro-life bill, the parental rights bill, the opportunity scholarships, expanding that, and several others.
It's wonderful. We have a lot of moms here. We're going to have some moms on the panel later that are going to talk about how they were involved in helping to make sure that that legislation ultimately passed. You need that grassroots army, I know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Susie, Tell us a little bit about your experience. It's my understanding you worked in public schools in North Carolina for a little over 5 years, and you now work in helping parents in the private school system. What was your time like in Surrey County, I believe?
So I worked in Surrey County Schools for 5 years, and I was the person that maintained the ISS program, so that's the in-school suspension program, along with the students that came in for online college courses. We had students that couldn't be in the main population for certain behavioral problems, or they were doing course recovery. So it was really a hodgepodge of students with different needs. One of the things I saw was that a lot of these students were students that were had undiagnosed learning disabilities, and a lot of their struggle was coming from the fact that they just fell through the cracks. There were some students that were just truly behavioral issues, and I left the public school system because I was threatened by one of those students who did actually actively follow through on that threat. And that day, he didn't hurt me physically, but that day we had the police involved, and at that point I knew it was time to seek something else. Loved working with the students, but needed to move on.
Wonderful. We're going to talk a little bit. This is one of the biggest issues, as I understand it, here in North Carolina. A lot of the discipline and violence issues you're seeing in schools, we're hearing it's the number one reason why teachers are leaving the teaching profession. So we need to really address that. God knows the unions aren't going to. So parents are going to help teachers on this issue. So Melissa, and Kenny, excuse me, and we'll come to next, Melissa, I'll come to you. Kenny, you spent 2 years, you said, doing research across the United States of America. We're here in North Carolina, your home state. What have you seen regarding DEI and CRT in the schools in North Carolina? How is it affecting the quality of education students are receiving?
I'm seeing a number of concerning things. Just 3 things to point out. One, just a couple of days ago in Lexington, North Carolina, a student was basically thrown out of class for the vocabulary word was alien. And he said, could you clarify, what does this mean? Does this mean like a space alien or like an illegal alien? And he was thrown out of class for that and suspended for 3 days. In Haywood County, North Carolina, there was controversy over a book called Dear Martin, which is basically teaches young Black boys that the police hate them and America hates them. And I've read the book. I read the book for my book. It is teaching them a victimhood narrative for young kids. So there's controversy over that book. There've been controversy over surveys in Moore County and New River County and Johnston County, and the amount of data that they have to collect on students, for what purpose, to what end, why such sensitive data, and all these discipline issues that are going on as well. So what is in North Carolina is hardly the worst that's going on in the nation, but it could be a lot better, that's for sure.
We're going to come back to those surveys. There's a federal law called the Protection of People Rights Amendment that actually says these surveys should not be given. It's against federal law to give these surveys, but it's still happening. And we'll come back to Kenny and talk to you a little bit about that. Melissa, you were on school board during COVID, and Union County was really a trailblazer when it came to COVID. You guys really tried to listen to your constituents, to let children breathe freely and to learn in your schools, but it's not, yep, let's give her a hand for that. The counties and the states that led during COVID were so incredibly important. They showed us a bright spot, that things didn't have to be the way that many were trying to make them to be, right? And so, but I heard you laid down the law on that school board. Tina and I know a little bit about that. Tell us, what was that experience like for you?
It was a very interesting experience, especially knowing that you're doing the right thing. You know, speaking for me and my other members that were on the Union County Board of Education, we were all there to support our 53 schools and our 42,000 students. And our objection is to have high achievement in education. And at every turn, we were being attacked by a woke culture, CRT, DEI. I wanted to share with you and everyone, there are Union County citizens right now that, because of the decisions we were making to be in person as soon as possible, to be mask optional, we were threatened with abatement
by Josh Stein, Mandy Cohen, Roy Cooper. I have letters.
Why don't you explain what that means, threatened with abatement?
So we had just been named the #1 performing school district in North Carolina during COVID. And that is because we got the kids back in the classroom and we were able to work with them and prepare them for their May end of grade testing.
Trade with you. There we go.
Knowing me, I hit the wrong button. Sorry about that. I felt like something was wrong. And so, we were doing everything right. We were working with the parents. The parents, like 85% of the parents in Union County wanted their students in person. They wanted their children to have in-person graduations. We did that safely. We did it outside because remember way back in the early days, they said sunlight would kill the virus. And so we were like, oh, great. We'll have them outside. We'll let all the kids come back to school because keep in mind, they had not been at school since March. We'll have the graduations outside on the football field, 10 feet apart. And in lieu of giving every senior 8 tickets, we'll give them 2 tickets. And so we did everything safely. But it was amazing how the leadership in Raleigh just came after us and wanted us to fail at every turn. But we were named the #1 performing school district, but number 116 in state funding. And so they threatened abatement on us when Roy Cooper, our governor, had dropped his mask mandate. So 55 school districts in North Carolina decided that they would return to school the following year, I believe that was 21, mask optional. And so shortly thereafter, 55 of us all got a threatening letter from Roy Cooper. And so 50 of the 55 immediately reversed and went back to mask required. And then they changed the toolkit. I don't know if you remember, but they altered the toolkit almost only on a weekly basis. They kept changing the rules. Well, when 5 of us did not agree to go back to mask required, they changed it. They changed the quarantine to make us look like we had thousands of kids out on COVID. Well, we didn't. We had hundreds out of 42,000 out on COVID. But I think at one point we might have had, because of the way they kept changing the rules, I think one week we had 4,800 students and teachers out on COVID. But the #1 performing school district, Mandy Cohen, threatened abatement if we didn't get in line, meaning that they would take over all 50.
It's a familiar story for me, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Meaning that they would come in, the state would come in and take over all 53 schools of the #1 performing academic and graduation rate school district in the whole state. So I told her to bring it on.
Mary, was that surprising to NC Values? The actions of the governor, the actions of other elected officials during COVID. What was the reaction of NC Values and your team?
Well, I wasn't with NC Values at the time, but knowing Tammy, she would fight like heck against anything like that. Parental rights are primary. They're significant in terms of they really are the foundation of liberty. That's what protects the family from the overarching power of government, is those parental rights, which really are the brick and mortar that separate us from the rule of government.
So Susie, let's talk a little bit about parental rights in education. So many parents, you told me a story of your own son, so many parents are frustrated because they're seeing that their children are not getting the services that they need in school to unfold their full potential. What's your experience been like working within the public school system in special education and then now in the private schools? What are you hearing from parents? And is there a demand for alternate programs for kids?
Yeah, so I didn't necessarily work in special education in the public school. I just got a lot of opportunities to work with students that hadn't been identified, but I felt like could have benefited from services. Now I'm actually working in a private school setting where we're able to, on a very small scale, work with students and meet them right where they are. And we're able to implement procedures and remediation that is actually working. I had a lot of colleagues that I worked with in the public school system that really were great educators that wanted to do a really good job for our kids. But because of policies that were being made or a lack of resources that were available to them or support, they just couldn't do all that they were demanded to do. And so I tell our parents when they come and apply for our program, hey, I would never knock the public school educators. That's not what we're about. What we're about is we're letting you know that there are resources out there. And we at NILD would love to share the years of research that have been compiled that show that there are things that we can do for students to raise those literacy rates. We think about the students that were learning to read, learning to speak, the phonological processing skills that weren't being acquired because of the mask, and they couldn't be taken off for any reason. That just really is going to start showing up. Well, it already is showing up, actually. It's going to start showing up with our literacy rates even more and more as we go on.
So Kenny, $30 billion budget in the state of North Carolina. I think I have that right. If it's a third of that money being spent on education, that's $10 billion. We talked about outcomes. They're not fantastic by any means. Where is all the money going, Kenny?
I don't know. It depends on which lobbyist you ask. So yeah, a third of the North Carolina budget is spent on education. In my research, what I found is that money is increasingly going to administration. It's to the point where teachers feel like if they want to move up in the world, if they want to get paid more, they have to go into administration. And that's pretty sad, because if you're a really good teacher, you should be teaching. And you should be teaching as much as you can so the students get much, and you should be paid to teach. So really the incentives should be opposite. It should be, if you're a teacher, you're a really good teacher, you should be incentivized to stay teaching. So we get to the point now where in some counties, the superintendent is the highest paid person in the county. And I met confidentially with an NC State leader of public education development, and she told me that that it's not that everybody's salaries should be raised. It's not that all teachers' salaries should be raised. It's that the good teachers' salaries should be raised, and the bad teachers need to be kicked out. And so there is a lot of bloat, but it comes from us actually not enforcing meritocracy in the place that we really should be enforcing.
Talk a little bit more about that, Kenny. What does that mean? What is meritocracy for someone that's listening and that's a word they really don't understand what it means within the public school system? Why is it important?
Well, it's important because we all want, I think, what Union County has been doing, which is the best outcomes for students. We want the best outcomes for math and reading, so we should be incentivizing the best outcomes, whether that is in the form, I advocate, because I did some research on the state of Mississippi, which did a mandatory literacy exam for all kids at the end of third grade that you had to pass or you weren't going to get passed up. And as a result, it really forced the teachers and the principals to be held to a standard, to a numeric standard. And therefore, that law has caused Black achievement in Mississippi to go from 29th in the nation to 4th in the nation in the span of 10 years. So I believe in meritocracy. I believe that outcomes can be earned, but you have to have the right incentives to do it.
Mary, we have touched a little bit on violence in the schools, discipline. Melissa, I want you to weigh in here too. Recently, I saw a video of a young man in Forsyth County who slapped a teacher twice. I believe that young man is now being held accountable for his actions. But what we've seen in schools across the United States and in North Carolina are programs and practices like restorative justice, which means kids aren't being held accountable for their actions. There is no consequence for this type of behavior. What has NC Values seen, and what do you guys think about this issue?
We don't deal with that directly, but having been a prosecutor, taught in college, I know quite a bit about restorative justice because it's not just in the education system, it's certainly in the judicial system. I think until we teach kids truth, objective truth, and start teaching and stop teaching relativism, we are never going to be able to administer justice. And I think that's what you're seeing a little bit in schools. We don't have consequences because we don't believe in we're not teaching absolute truth. You and I believe in absolute truth. We don't believe that there is an objective right and wrong, and therefore the consequences that result from that are not going to be underscored and undergirded with the idea of justice, which is you get what you deserve. So I think it's far deeper than the kids not being. I think it's a systemic problem that is across society, but it's being reflected in the child not reaping the consequences of slapping a teacher. But it's across the board. Even with picking juries, it's very difficult to find juries that will decide that a person is wrong in their actions, because they've been soaked in relativism their whole lives and they don't believe in an objective right and wrong.
So on top of being bad for the child, Melissa, not being held, accountable for any consequences, not, holding high expectations for every child in the classroom, it affects the learning for every other child in the classroom. We have this discipline issues. And as I touched on, teachers are leaving the teaching profession. Schools are not safe. They know this, and they're not getting a lot of support. Union County deal with this issue. What have you heard from other school board members around the state?
So we were actually dealing with this before COVID, years before COVID. We have an alternative school that when children or students commit, certain violations, they go to the alternative school. And it's honestly is a great place for a student in that circumstance to go to because it's a smaller class size. They get, guidance counseling and therapists, and people will work with them to give them pathways and options that they didn't have beforehand if they want to work their way back to their home school. So that's something that was very important to us that, if you commit this act, you will go to the alternative school. And if it's severe enough, we would put them online because they wouldn't even be safe to be around the students and staff at the alternative school. So that was the one time I believed in giving them a device to get their education, because if they weren't safe to be around anyone, then they could go home with a device, but not for COVID. But one of the things that I learned as a school board member is that long before COVID came, administration was already trying to keep discipline issues in the classroom. And our particular board kept saying, if this student is distracting the teacher and distracting the other 22, 23, 25 students in that classroom, then there's no instruction going on. And what I found as the chair of the curriculum committee, when you look at the North Carolina modules, the teachers literally have like 1 to 2 days to check things off, and they have to move to the next check mark. And so if your students are having to watch bystanders of this one discipline issue in the classroom because administration or the principal or anyone doesn't want to remove them from the classroom, then the other 20, 25 students are not checking their boxes so that they can be prepared for their test. And so our school board, long before COVID, we let our superintendent and the deputy superintendent, who was reducing our numbers at the alternative school, we went from like having 200 kids there to 40. And so we were like, okay, what's going on? They didn't just become angels overnight. And so we knew what the average was. And so we let the board held the superintendent and his cabinet staff their feet to the fire and said, get those kids to the alternative school so that they can learn how to earn their way back. They may not. Some of them graduate from the alternative school, if that's a graduation for you. And so the leadership, I think for many decades, we just didn't know what was going on, but the mindset was already there to keep them in the classroom, and the good students who really wanted to learn were being interrupted. And so our particular board said, no, 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 send them to the alternative school, and just because it's been 30 days or 65 days or the end of the semester, they must earn their way back or start over.
So you bring up a good point of, it's not like some of the things that Kenny will talk about. And Kelly, I want to know exactly, what do the surveys look like? What is the critical pedagogy in the schools, the critical theory that's been laced into every crack and crevice of what they're teaching? What does that really look like in North Carolina schools? But it's not happening in the same way in every district, is it? So who would like to speak to that a little bit? Mary, I don't know if you have a good sense of kind of, where some of the most woke counties are, where we're seeing some of the biggest issues in North Carolina. And then Kenny, maybe you can give us some specifics about some of what we're seeing.
Well, part of the time when we weren't in session, I spent looking at how many counties were complying with the Parental Bill of Rights. And I noticed that one of the biggest heartburn issues is the gender issue. And it's in the larger counties. That's where they're spending their time. You want to know where they're spending their time? They're spending their time with gender issues and gender transitioning. Buncombe, Orange, Charlotte, Mecklenburg, several of them. They'll go and notify the parent about the name and pronoun consistent with the Parental Bill of Rights. Well, if they're going to change their name and pronoun, we'll tell them, but we may or may not tell them about this entire gender transitioning plan. So basically, you're telling the parents and putting them in the spectator box while the school transitions their child. And in Buncombe, I don't know if anybody's here from Buncombe, Stacy Metcalf and some of the other girls that were up there. They went to that school board meeting, and the gender transition lobby was all over that school board. And it is shocking to me how much that issue has infiltrated so many things in North Carolina.
So gender ideology, critical race theory, critical theory in general. Kenny, how did this stuff get into our schools and has now taken over academic achievement?
Well, there are two historical causes magnifying policy. One is the critical race theory that started in Harvard Law School and started when a lot of Black professors started saying that even though we have passed civil rights, the white man is still oppressing this country. And so they transformed that into a pedagogy to put into kids to make Black kids feel like victims. The second part is where the whole idea of critical pedagogy came from, which is Paulo Freire, which is the pedagogy of the oppressed. His best-selling book sold over 3 million copies in the United States. It's all about how to make a child aware of his position in society, which is the oppressed position. If you just read the book, he doesn't even want schools to teach phonics anymore. He wants schools to teach words so that kids learn that they're an oppressed human being. And that became the most influential book in teachers' colleges across America. Columbia Teachers College led to all kinds of policy based on that. And you want to know where you get woke teachers? That's where you get woke teachers.
So teacher prep, big issue, huh, in our teachers' colleges. Anyone else want to weigh in on that? Susie, do you have any thoughts?
A lot of thoughts. So as I'm thinking about what you're saying, and we're talking about policy and policymakers, I really have been in that situation in the classroom, both in a public school setting and a private school setting. And the difference that I've experienced in the private school setting is a freedom to teach. That's what our teachers need. They need a freedom to teach. While I know we have to have testing and we have to be able to evaluate results and it has to be measurable and there have to be goals, There's something to be said for that human factor of being that mediator for that student and being free to do that without fear of somebody coming along and saying, okay, you violated this law and you violated this policy and you can't teach that way and you can't teach phonics. You've got to teach it this way. When did we stop allowing teachers to be teachers? We send them to colleges where they're trained, and then we say, okay, you've done what we've asked you to do. You've met the requirements to come and be licensed in our state to teach, but now we're going to put you in a stronghold and say, this is what you have to do instead of what you're trained to do and what your God-given talents and abilities and creativity could create in that classroom. That's been my experience.
So Mary, yeah, Melissa, please go ahead.
I just wanted to chime in from a school board point of view. Not every teacher has the heart that you have. And I saw that firsthand as a school board chair. To answer your question, how does this happen or how does it get into our schools? Well, we have so many teachers that, our teachers that are retiring, and we have so many good teachers that have reached retirement age. And what I saw in Union County, two or three things. We needed teachers. There's a shortage of teachers. And so the ones that are coming in have certainly been indoctrinated in their universities and their internships. And what we saw in Union County was a flood of teachers. I truly believe that Union County has a target, that there is an agenda to change Union County. And so they are moving in mass droves. We had people flying in from the Bronx just to attend our school board meetings and to riot. They had to put up concrete barriers to keep our parents safe from the rioters. And so Union County, unfortunately hit the map for what we were doing, and they started moving in and applying for those vacancies. And then the other thing that I will mention is book donations. We found certain books that are 100% pornography. I don't even know that Hustler or anything else comes close to the books we found in our schools, thanks to some of our Moms for Liberty parents who took that time to go in and check the books out and sticky note them for us. It's there, and we found out a lot of it is through book donations. They are infiltrating us at every opportunity.
Yeah, Union County can't be an outlier. You can't be successful doing the right things in school, right? Because then everybody's going to look and say, what are they doing in Union County? They don't want parents knowing what you're doing in Union County. They want to change that. Go ahead.
So this is how we fixed it.
I love Melissa.
Chair,
It's like my
chair
spirit
and
animal in
vice
North Carolina.
chair. Boy, I've been told I need to write a book. I was the chair. My vice chair, Kathy Hindhill at the time, we took all of those books that Moms for Liberty gave us with the sticky notes, and I demanded a meeting with our superintendent and our deputy superintendent, and then the lady over libraries and everything. I brought them into the boardroom, and I laid all the books out on the table, and then I handed one to Dr. Breedlove, and I said, please turn to page da-da-da, and I said, I would like for you to read to us. And so Dr. Breedlove started to read to us, and it was very uncomfortable. The content was horrifying. And so that was one approach we decided to take, to let them know books in our schools are not age appropriate. Do you want to be charged for providing pornography to a minor? And then our general counsel was quick to let me know, well, that can't happen to a school administrator. There's laws to protect them.
So we're going to close out this panel in a moment. My last question is for Mary. You touched on a little bit the help of the Moms for Liberty chapter. Mary, what has it meant in North Carolina to have parents becoming more engaged in their children's education and in policy?
It is critical. I mean, it is the bottom line reason that success has happened in North Carolina. And we've got a long way to go. But I tell you, those Buncombe County Moms for Liberty, they kicked butt in Buncombe County, and it was fascinating to watch. You know, I prepped them up, and I told them, you know, we worked quite a few Zoom sessions on what to do and how to say it, and they got up there, and the gender guy was like, the gender lobby, he says, I don't know, but there's this firm of lawyers who came down to Buncombe County, and they've gone through every single line. And I'm sitting there thinking, no, it's me and Stacy Metcalf and Moms for Liberty. Y'all did it. I mean, I was just part of the process, and you took what we said and you just hauled it and really made them squirm. So
That's pretty
great.
awesome. That's pretty awesome. Well, thank you to our panel, and thank you to NC Values for being such an amazing policy partner. Next, we're going to hear from some of these moms. I'm going to introduce the moms who are going to be on our next panel. Moms for Liberty members, some have served as chapter chairs. And they truly are making such an amazing difference across the entire United States of America. These legislators just don't know what to do with us, do they? So first up on the panel, we have Brooke Weiss. Brooke Weiss chartered the first chapter of Moms for Liberty in North Carolina, which was the 11th in the nation. She has been the chair of Moms for Liberty Mecklenburg for over 3 years and is also the vice chair of the North Carolina Legislative Committee. She was awarded the Sybil Luddington Award for raising awareness at the 2023 National Joyful Warriors Summit. She has lived in Charlotte since 2017, and Brooke and her husband are parents to 3 daughters. 2 have graduated from the Charlotte Mecklenburg school system, and their youngest is still in high school. Brooke is certified science teacher, lobbied for the passage of the North Carolina Parents' Bill of Rights, and has appeared on national and local television and spoken on radio advocating for parental rights. Thank you, Brooke Weiss, for joining us this evening. Next up, we have Brittany Bolden. Brittany has a master's degree in speech pathology and has helped people young and old improve their communication abilities. Early in her career, she became disillusioned with being able to provide quality speech therapy in the public schools and opened a private practice. Due to her own childhood reading difficulties, she became passionate about helping children overcome their reading difficulties through a multisensory approach to phonological processing. Throughout her own children's experience, she again started to see problems with the education system. During the 2020 school lockout, she finally realized that public education is fundamentally broken. Quickly realizing that a broken education system meant a broken country and future for her children, she decided to start a Moms for Liberty chapter in Union County, North Carolina. It rapidly became a force for change, giving parents a voice in the education process. After 2 years as a chapter chair, Brittany accepted a job with the National Moms for Liberty organization and now serves as the chapter support coordinator. She remains active in her local chapter and serves as its state legislative committee representative. Next up is Neely Turlington. Neely Turlington is a public relations professional by trade whose past clients include international and regional companies. She has been working in chapter support with the Moms for Liberty national team for nearly 2 years. Neely is inspired by her teenage son, Eli. She has been an education advocate for students with exceptional needs for more than a decade. Her focus has been on helping Eli and other students with learning and medical challenges access quality, individualized instruction, support, and remediation. Just last year, she and her husband found a Christian school with a program for students to receive learning therapy and remediation. Neely served on State Superintendent Catherine Truitt's Parent Advisory Commission, represents her local Moms for Liberty chapter on the State Legislative Committee, and is lobbying the General Assembly for more transparency and funding for an ever-growing population of exceptional students. Thank you for joining us, Neely. Annette Albright was born in Mount Airy, North Carolina. Yay. She moved to Charlotte in the early 90s. Annette has always been a champion for children. She adopted and raised 3 foster children and 1 biological daughter. After working in the NC prison system and adult probation parole, Annette desired to reach individuals before they entered the criminal justice system. Annette was hired as an internal substitute teacher with Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools in 2013. During her tenure with CMS, she also served in the roles of tutor and behavior modification technician. After being violently assaulted by a group of students at a Charlotte Mecklenburg high school during 2016, Annette has been a strong and vocal advocate for safe schools. Annette holds an AAS in Corrections and Juvenile Services, a BA in Criminal Justice, and an MSL in Organizational Management and Leadership Development, and numerous certifications. Annette is the former Education Chair with the Charlotte branch of the NAACP and is currently a citywide advocate for safe schools. Thank you for joining us, Annette. Last up is Natasha, too, and I will tell you I have a special place in my heart for Moms for Liberty members who decide to run for school board, and that's exactly what Natasha is doing. Natasha is the founding and former chair of the New Hanover County chapter of Moms for Liberty, which was launched in June of 2022. After deciding to run for the New Hanover County Board of Education, she made the difficult decision to step down as the chapter chair to focus her efforts on her campaign. Natasha is a humble servant of God Almighty and an incredibly proud mother of a very smart and beautiful 16-year-old young lady. She is the proud and grateful daughter, granddaughter, and great-granddaughter of a long line of dedicated military veterans. Natasha is a 10-year veteran firefighter, EMT, state hazmat technician, and emergency management coordinator of the city of Wilmington. Natasha has been noted as the most constitutional conservative Board of Education candidate running in New Hanover County in 2024, and she is running to make academics great again. Parents are the #1 driver of student success. We should be rolling out the carpet, the red carpet for parents in our public education system, but we're not. Mics are being shut off. Parents are being silenced. Who wants to start? Annette, you want to start with you for a second? Let's talk a little bit. You spent some time working in the public education system. I mentioned that you were violently assaulted. You shared with me by 8 students at the school where you were working. What was that experience like for you, and what have you learned since then?
So let me give you a little bit of my background. I also worked in the prison system, and I was an adult probation parole officer for a total of 14 years. And after not breaking through the barriers that was stopping adults from getting on a better path, I decided that, you know what, the best thing to do is to hit them earlier. So I left my job, took a $14,000 a year pay cut, and went to CMS, Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools. And my first year there, I was basically doing tutoring and substitute teaching. And I saw a lot of challenges. I then took a job as a behavior modification technician because I also have some background in mental health. And I'm a member of NAMI, which is the National Alliance of Mental Illness. So I took a behavior modification technician job at Harding High School. And I can tell you, the first day I was there, the bell rang and nobody moved. The students just stood there. They kept talking. They were on cell phones, whatever. And then maybe 15 or 20 minutes later, they kind of moseyed on into class. My 4th day there was a riot. CMPD was called in. Snoopy, which is the CMPD helicopter, was called in. SWAT was called in from CMPD. The principal was hurt. Administrators had to go to the hospital. It was one of the most chaotic things that I've ever seen in my life. And I'm going to be honest, I felt it was my 4th day and I should just observe. So I stood inside the freshman building and just looked out, and it literally looked like something from a movie. So maybe a month later, I just realized these kids are coming to school and they're not learning anything. Not one thing. So I decided to just push into gear and kind of take over. And as far as the behavior modification piece, and, I start giving them modules, I start saying, listen, this is a matrix we need to use. Kids have to suffer consequences. When the bell rings, they need to go to class. So what I did was I instructed, when the bell rings and the kids don't move, lock the doors. And we'll gather them all up. We'll take them to the auditorium. We'll call the principal to come get them. And by me doing things like that, you would have thought that I would be the most hated person on the campus, but I was not. So after a while, everyone got so relaxed, the fights had stopped, and it was just implementing different policies and strategies and different processes and holding the students accountable. That's all I did. So everyone had got so relaxed. Near the end of the school year, some students were being returned from the alternative program against the advice of the psychologist, who said, I don't think they're ready. It was about maybe 6 days before school was about to be out for the summer. There was a thing going on at Hardin at the time called a silent protest, when almost every Friday, the teachers will all call it out in protest. Thursday or Friday, I can't remember. It was 2016. So this particular day, students were everywhere because we had so many substitute teachers. Nobody knew who should be where. So there was a group of maybe 15 to 20 students. And mind you, we had 5 behavior modification technicians, 6 security guards, 2 resource officers. So they came across this group of students after the bell had rang. Instead of finding out where they need to go, they pushed them all into the building I was in. You would have a security guard and a behavior modification technician in each building. They kept calling for the security guard. He didn't show up because he was off doing other things. So after about 5 minutes, I was finally like, I'm going to have to take care of this. So I walked down to where the students are congregating in the hall, and I'm talking to them. It's light, it's friendly. I'm like, hey guys, it's 6 days left. Go to class, any class, I don't care. Pick a class, but just go. All it took was for one student to start getting mouthy, and the rest of them joined right in. After finally calling for my other 4 BMTs, the security guards, and the 2 resource officers, nobody showed up. So the students finally kind of started to move out of my building. I was going to walk behind them to make sure they did exit my building because none of them belonged in my building. And as I started down the stairs, one of the students turned around and she came up to me, and she was probably this close to me, and she's taller than me. So I tell her to get back, and I put my hands up to create space between us, and she slapped me. And my probation officer training kicked in, which is put space between you and the threat. So I immediately pushed her off of me. And when she fell back, then all the rest of them, it was about 8 students, and they all just started attacking me. I still did not get help until a student opened the door and said, help, they're jumping Miss Albright. I had a concussion. I had scratches. I had bruises, so many bruises through my head that 2 weeks later, maybe 3, I went to my hairdresser and she actually started crying. And I think the most disappointing thing about that for me, I have been an officer of the court, so I probably know you. Yeah, 26th Judicial District. And of course, as a sworn officer of the court, you know, our first duty is you tell the truth and you just let the pieces fall where they do, because credibility is everything. So I told the absolute truth, told what happened, got the report from CMS and was like, whose report is this? It was so different than what actually happened. And immediately I was labeled the villain. I instigated the whole thing. And the poor students were just on their way to class. And here came me, no Miss Albright bothering them. And I think that was it was very hurtful. People in the community immediately turned on me. You know, I was getting messages on the internet. But one thing that should have stood out to everyone is the fact that all the students were saying, no, Miss Albright's great. And it got so bad for the students that were involved that one mother had to take her daughter out of town because the other students were like, we're going to get you.
Wow. That is a shocking story, and I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. We are hearing about more and more teachers leaving the teaching profession because of the state in the schools, and that they're not able to implement different good behavioral practices, that the administration is tying their hands. And so you're the vice chair, Brooke, of the legislative committee for Moms for Liberty in North Carolina. Why don't you quickly tell the audience about what is a legislative committee? What do you guys do? And then let's speak about the discipline issue for a moment more, if you could. I know that it's on your legislative agenda.
Sure. I'll just.
First, I'll tell you that I am a certified teacher. I don't teach anymore. I left over behavioral issues. A student that had been threatening me for the whole entire school year, when he attacked my partner teacher, beat him to a pulp, I decided that I needed to go. So our legislative committee, we have someone on the committee from each of our 19 chapters across the state, and we work at a state level with legislators to forward an agenda. We work real hard to come up with our agenda. We just released our 2024 agenda a couple of weeks ago, and we address behavior. We know that when teachers don't feel safe, we're not going to attract good teachers. We know that we're losing teachers over behavior. But as you were speaking, learning doesn't happen in an environment where a teacher is having to spend all of her time or his time managing the behavior of maybe one singular student in the class. And so when she's focusing on that student, she's not able to teach. The rest of the class is not learning. It's a very bad situation. The other thing is that children need consequences. Restorative justice has been an utter failure. You can't just send a kid to an office to talk it out and send them back to class with a lollipop, which is what happens. Children need to be told no, and they need to face consequences for their behavior, or they do not learn. And we are seeing out in society now what happens when kids don't learn either at home or in their school system. When they learn that they get away with behavior, they will continue to push the boundaries until they finally meet one. And so that's why they're either ending up in prison. That's why we're seeing the problems spill out from K through 12 now.
It is taking parents. Oh, let's switch again. It's taking parents getting involved to try to support teachers in this issue, because the unions are not supporting teachers when it comes to the discipline issues that we're seeing in the schools. Mary, on our previous panel, mentioned the importance of parental rights. One of the things that I know you all are advocating here for in North Carolina on your legislative agenda is to insert the word fundamental into your parents' Bill of Rights. Brittany, can you talk a little bit about what parental rights mean to you?
Is this on? Okay. It's really quite simple. They're God-given. You don't get your parental rights from your government. They're God-given. No one can take them away. They're yours. And studies show, I mean, it's proven that parents, yes, there's always going to be exceptions, right? Because that's what everyone always says. Well, there's exceptions. There's always going to be exceptions. But the majority of the time, children are best with their parents. Their best supporter, their best advocate are their parents. And in the situations where they're not, there are things in place to take care of that. There's no reason to blanket this. So we think that it's very important that our government knows, because we are government by the people. So we want the government to know that we are telling them parental rights are given by God to us and they can't take them.
Thank you for that. It's incredibly important. So I hope you get that word fundamental in there. We need to put the government back in the teeny tiny box it belongs in. My friend Kevin Roberts at the Heritage Foundation always says that, and I think it's very appropriate. New Hanover County, Natasha, I saw you on Steve Bannon's War Room talking about the fact that you had a school in New Hanover County that they were considering closing to make what they called a newcomer school for illegal immigrants here in North Carolina. Can you talk a little bit about that? And talk a little bit also about the state of academics in New Hanover County.
Sure, thank you. Back in November, I'd actually taken a few months to attend 2 school board meetings, and that's the first time that has happened in 4 years, back to back. I was a little frustrated with our current situation. But in November, right around Thanksgiving, we learned there was an emergency Latino meeting. One of our members in New Hanover County attended that, and what we learned, or what she learned while she was there, blew our minds. In the same power presentation, they mentioned closing what's called the Career Readiness Academy. It's a small high school program for children with exceptionalities or special needs. It has actually a higher graduation rate than one of our other traditional high schools. And they were going to close it because it was too expensive per pupil and leverage those resources for a newcomer center. 2 weeks prior to this Latino meeting, where they are introducing this concept to our Latino families, our superintendent and the chief academics, they visited Guilford County, if I'm not mistaken, to take a tour, and there's a school similar there. Putting 2 to 2 together, it wasn't hard to figure out what their intentions were. And I honestly say that's probably what lit me up, and I decided to run for school board. The lack of transparency, the lack of accountability, the brazenness, complete disregard for the school board's authority. Our county commissioners didn't know about it. The school board didn't know about it. The community didn't know about it. What I was most impressed with is I'm not sure if anyone has done a lot of public speaking, but you always get a little bit nervous. These kids in that program showed up for 3 months straight, begging the school system, please don't shut our school down. The state of academics, despite the 88% graduation rate, we've got 60% of our students that are not proficient at Math 1, and almost half can't read at their grade level. There's nothing good about this. We're losing teachers because of increased violence, acts of violence. I think statewide, just from the 2021-22 year to the following year, there was an 18% increase in acts of violence. But just for pre-pandemic years, that's a 38% increase in our schools with acts of crime and violence. How is anybody learning in this environment? Why teachers don't feel safe? Students don't feel safe.
That's a lot to take in. Neely, you have a son who has exceptional needs. You've worked very hard to meet those needs for him now. What is the state of special education in North Carolina? How are kids doing in school?
Well, my son, who is now a freshman in high school, so this started about 10 years ago in public school, we knew after having 2 tours of kindergarten that in first grade, there were some deficiencies in reading. And luckily, he had a teacher that came to me and said, he's performing behind his peers. I would like to implement a special program in the classroom, some specialized instruction. And now I need you to tell me that in writing. I can't advocate for this. You have to advocate for this, and I want you to word it this specific way. And I thought, he was our first child, our only child. And I thought, well, that's strange. And of course, once the program started working, it was pulled from a support. And that was really frustrating because I thought, if there are some supports that are needed, and in our case, we call them extra needs. If there are some extra needs that are needed, why wouldn't we continue to do that so he continues to stay on track and not pull it and push it? And so by the 4th grade, he had some real deficiencies. And I spent that year in multiple 3-hour meetings trying to advocate for an IEP, which in North Carolina, that would be individualized instruction, pull out instruction for him so that he could again start catching up with his peers. And we were denied that for him. And there were 2 reasons that were given. One is, well, he's passing. So there's that. And secondly, we just don't have the resources. But if you would like to hire one of our special education teachers on your dime at $30 an hour after school, she's available and does tutoring. So we, of course, did that. I mean, as a parent advocate, someone who had the education, the resources, the time to dig for this, my son was very blessed in having that. That's not a typical situation for many families. And just to think about families who, maybe don't have the means and resources, families that don't speak English. I can't imagine So all the advocacy led us to a point where he's an exceptionally bright child. His potential is limitless. Why isn't that being recognized? Why is there this gap where children are falling in, but as long as they're passing, we don't have time for that, we don't have bandwidth for that, and we certainly don't have the funding. And so now in high school, he is in a program that is put together by NILD, which Susie Cole talked about earlier. And
Today was a special day
it's
for you.
difficult to say.
No, this is so exciting.
And he went from a very average performing student to this morning being inducted to the National Beta Club. And I say that because we are failing our students at so many turns. We aren't recognizing unlimited potential. We aren't supporting that. We aren't challenging excellence. Instead of, it's okay, we'll remediate, we'll keep, we'll continue to show him all the test scores that are average and they're okay. He's not building confidence that way. He's not feeling success and building on that. How can you? And so we found it very frustrating in Forsyth County is where we are. I had an advocate that was provided to me from a parent group that's here in Raleigh called ECAC. She came in from Raleigh and attended these IEP meetings with me. And after the last one, she knew we weren't going to get that IEP. And she said, I have never been in a room where decisions are being made and the parents are being cut out. And I think that's the difference. In the program that he's with, we partner in his education. We don't partner in his upbringing, but we partner in his education. And there's a difference there. And the school that he is in recognizes that. And it has been a huge success and an absolute game changer for him and our family.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And we're so excited for your son. Congratulations again. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? You know, it's frustrating to me as a speech therapist. I worked in the schools in Mississippi and in the public schools. And I sat in a meeting with district-wide, all the speech therapists from the whole district. And there are norms that you look at, developmental norms for kids to hit certain sounds that they can say. And I sat in that meeting and I had graduated from graduate school. I had learned over and over again, you always want the earliest intervention as possible. That is what is best for the student. And I sat in that meeting and we voted on new norms. And they chose norms that were the highest. So that meant the norms where the kids would obtain the sound, like, so let's say R, let's say it was 5. So let's say they would say, you know what, let's make the norm 7. Okay, because we don't have the funding to do that. So we want to push the norm back so these kids, we can put them off. Well, part of speech pathology, part of speech development is it's a bit of a habit, right? So after you do it for many years, it's harder to undo it. And then I would sit there and I would watch this funding go for stuff that had absolutely zero to do with the students and the academics. And I'm like, why is this happening? Why are we choosing later developmental norms when we're wasting all this money on stuff that is not actually about educating students? And mind you, not every speech therapy student will end up with a reading problem. But if you look and you take the kids that have trouble with reading, a large portion of them had early warning signs with speech issues. It is tied, and did you know that typically, I know in North Carolina, you cannot get speech services unless you have another therapy. You can't even get speech therapy by itself, but it drastically can affect reading. It's like the canary in the coal mine, and we're just ignoring it.
So I hope you're getting a sense from this panel of very engaged moms who know exactly what the issues are that are happening in public education. So my message to Randy Weingarten, Becky Pringle, or whatever other union crony they want to talk to, tell us we're not the experts for our own children or that we can't advocate for them, that we don't know what we're talking about.
what gives equity? You know what equity is? Being able to read, being able to speak, being able to communicate.
Being able to read. This legislative agenda for North Carolina is impressive. You guys cover a lot of different issues. One of the issues that I do want to talk about before we end, and whoever wants to weigh in, Brooke, Annette, Natasha, if you want to weigh in on this, your age of consent in North Carolina is 12. What does that mean, informed age of consent, lowered down to the age of 12, Brooke?
It's not even that, Tiffany. There is no minimum age of consent for treating certain medical conditions. A child can be treated without their parents' knowledge or consent for pregnancy, STDs, drug and alcohol abuse, and for quote unquote emotional disturbance. Here in North Carolina, the whole child, whole community model is being very heavily pushed. And if there's no age of consent here for those type of issues, potentially a child could end up on Ritalin or an antidepressant, and the parent would not even have any input or maybe not even knowledge about that. So that's a problem. That is a real problem. And I know that Neely sat through some meetings about that and can speak to it. And so did our Wake County chair, asked some real hard questions that there weren't really answers. There weren't answers for. So a large part of it is bringing awareness to that because parents do not know.
Neely, do you want to speak to your experience?
I was going to say, even though our son is in public school, I'm very engaged in our local Moms for Liberty chapter in Forsyth County because I don't just care about my child, I care about all children, that they all access a great education. And several of us met with a legislator, and he was not aware that in Forsyth County, there are 12 medical clinics in our schools, complete with treatments, medicines, doctors, mental health services. He said, no, we said no to that. And I said, sir, respectfully, we have 12 operating in our county. And so the power of parents in that instance is we're the feet on the ground. We elect the officials, but we're the information. And we were giving information to an active representative in our state government who did not know. And so that model is ushering in some really dangerous things.
Yeah.
And tonight, in fact, there is a meeting about pushing forward that model in Forsyth County even more.
I want to talk about that, and then Natasha and Annette, I'll let you give you a chance to weigh in. For anyone that doesn't know what we're talking about, the WISC model, whole school, whole child, whole community model, pushed by the CDC and the Department of Education, the Department of Health and Human Services. Health equity is going to be used to transform our education system in America. It's incredibly important that we have local representatives, school board members that are directly linked to constituents in their community. You're there to listen to the concerns of parents and to be able to act most directly to solve those issues and problems. What the federal government and the unions, especially when Randy Weingarten went and testified before Congress and she was asked about COVID learning losses, she said the one thing we need to do, we need wraparound services for the kids. We need community schools. We will never be able to untangle the federal government from education if we allow the community schools, the WISC model, to continue. The funding from the federal government into public schools, which now is anywhere between 3 and 16% given on the state, will balloon. And there will be services given in schools to students that will blow your mind, that parents won't know about and that we won't be able to stop. Of course, the unions like this. They want the federal government to have more and more control over public education, but we know and closest to the people is best. So the school-based health clinics are a danger. Everyone needs to be aware of them. You should be asking your elected representatives about them, asking if they're happening in your schools and actively working against them. If you don't know how to get involved and engaged on this issue, contact your local Moms for Liberty chapter. They know about school-based health clinics and they will help you to enforce your parental rights. Natasha, what have you seen with regard to community schools or anything else you'd like to mention as we close out the panel?
I'd like to say back in 2022, we were one of 17 counties that flipped to a conservative majority school board. And with that flip, we had really high expectations. Yes, thank you. A lot of it came with Moms for Liberty support. We had really high expectations with a conservative school board that we would get things done. And it was really frustrating to me that everything got held up in policy meetings and agenda meetings. If you have questions, if you have concerns, Moms for Liberty groups, we are connected. As you said earlier, I have no connections to national news. When the Career Readiness Academy issue came out, it happened so fast, right around the holidays. You wouldn't think anybody would be paying attention, but everybody in New Hanover County was paying attention. And I made a few phone calls through Pat and Tiffany and Tina, and within 12 hours, the whole nation knew about New Hanover County. So don't think your voice can't have far, wide reaching, because it can. If you have questions, if you want to get involved, if it seems overwhelming, you're not alone. It's done deliberately. They want to make you feel, when I say they, the system, they want to make you feel like you have no options before you. You do. You have a whole support staff, and I'm so proud of North Carolina. New Hanover County was the 13th chapter to form, but well, we have parents across the nation, and we're not the only ones going through this. There may be other counties a little bit further ahead. So when you come across that situation, reach out to one of us, and I guarantee you we'll have an answer somewhere. And if we don't, we'll get it.
Love that. Thank you for that. Annette, you're somewhat new to the Moms for Liberty crowd, right? And so, yeah, thank you, Natasha. So a lot of stuff is said about Moms for Liberty. I mean, no, I know no one believes that. But I mean, every time I open up the newspaper, we're being called some name, right? I think they want to name you, shame you, blame you, keep you silent. Getting involved with Brooke and with the chapter and getting to know all of us, have there been surprises? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think I actually met Brooke. We had talked for like 2 hours, and I was already like, this is going to be my best friend when, and then she was like, oh, by the way, I'm Brooke from Moms from Liberty. And I was like, oh, the little she-devil, Brooke, you're that person? But she is not that person. She is very passionate about what she does. I've been called the same thing. I'm out to destroy Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. But what I'm trying to do is make Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools safe. I want them to be safe for students, and I want the school system to be safe for educators. So that has been my goal the entire time. And I will add quickly that, I worked in a prison system, in a men's prison system for 4 years at the facility. Never assaulted, never attacked. I was a probation parole officer, which means I could go into your house and put your husband in handcuffs and take him to jail without a warrant, without the DA's permission, CMPD's. I've done that. I was assaulted in a public. And I think if you don't take anything away from that, from here tonight, at least think about that. We have to make our schools safe, or nothing else works. We don't have educators because they're afraid. And teachers and educators, they email me all the time and send me video clips. I think that I am the first one to put the clip up of the students slapping the teacher in Forsyth County on Twitter, because someone sent it to me and said, can you help her? And so I immediately put it up. And I think the last time I looked at it, it had over 20,000 views. So we have to help and support these teachers and stop worrying about image and what we want it to look like. We have to work hard, and it's hard work. I mean, I've gotten threats. I was told that I didn't win a school board seat because I was friends with Brooke, and I was like, well, I'll take my friend over the school board seat any day of the week. So it is hard work, and people will push back, but you just have to keep pushing, and it's for our children. That's what we have to remember, is for the children.
I just want to thank Annette for coming, because it was a brave thing. She has been attacked viciously for even associating with Moms for Liberty. I want to point out that it's not hard to find common ground. Annette and I don't agree on many many things politically. But when you narrow your conversation to education and to children, it's very easy to find common ground. Who doesn't want public schools to improve? Who doesn't want children to thrive? And so, I don't know what Annette thinks about other issues, abortion, immigration. That's not what we talk about. We talk about education and literacy and behavior problems. And so Moms for Liberty is a very diverse group. We are truly unaffiliated. We have members of all political affiliations sitting up on this stage right now. I hope that everybody will get involved and connect with your local chapter or your nearest chapter. We're super easy to find. Just go to momsforliberty.org and there's a big map of the United States. I don't take for granted that people know geography, so you don't have to click on your state. You can type in your location too. But I did want to thank Annette. Annette may have lost her race because she had the courage to show up to a Moms for Liberty meeting and didn't deny that.
Yeah, run again, Annette. We'll make sure you win this time. Well, thank you to our parent panel. We're going to take some questions, and so I'm going to invite the parent panel's here. I don't know if we can fit everyone on stage. If you want to try to, I don't know that we can, if you want to come and stand, if you could, and we'll pass the microphone around the other panelists, and we'll take questions from the audience. I'm sorry? We can move everybody down and put some more stools up? Okay, let's do that. I can stand. I'll stand. So you guys sit in the chairs. So while we're getting the chairs arranged, I will say this. All viewpoints are welcome at a Moms for Liberty meeting. Everything we do is open and transparent, open to the public. Every event we have, we live stream. You can go back and watch all of the town halls we've had, all of the summits we've had, all the breakouts that we've had. Nothing is secret. It can all go on the front page of the New York Times. As you have heard tonight, we are concerned about academic achievement. We are concerned about student safety. We're concerned about the future of our country. I ask, as you ask questions, to ask questions in a polite and respectful manner. Everyone has taken time out of their busy lives to join us today. If you are not respectful for some reason, you will be removed. And that's the last thing I'll say about that. I'm a mom of four, so I mean business. All right, so Pat Blackburn has the microphone. Please ask questions. If you have a question of any of the panelists, raise your hand and we'll take a question or two or three. I'm hoping somebody's got to have a question. Charlie, oh, no, here we go. Right in the front. Wonderful, thank you.
Illegal immigration is a huge topic in our country today. How does that and the resources that we have for education become affected when all of these illegal immigrant children descend on our public school system? And what challenges does that bring into the classroom? Violence, I'm sure, is one of them, but there have to be educational and communication issues as well. So I'm not sure who's the best person to attack that. Maybe you can go with that one.
I had to consider this very issue. Now, we all know that they're flooding over our border, but I never imagined they would be flooding into my county. You have to consider we're at a $20 million deficit this year alone. This doesn't include adding more students. I don't know where we would put them. We're already overcrowded. We don't have the resources. We don't have the resources for having certain special needs instructors. So I think it would tax on every level, affect everything about education. And I sincerely hope we work really hard to defend our students in school and let them learn and not assimilate people. I'm welcome for people, immigrants, legally, come on in. But when you flood your system at a max, it's not good for anyone. There's no money, there's no teachers, there's no room. And you're gonna put all those kids in one school or one school system. It's a disaster in the making.
What are the solutions that are on the table to help alleviate the lack? I mean, taxpayers are paying for all of these people that are not taxpayers anymore, and we're educating the world at this point. So how do we ensure that we're prioritizing our citizens' children versus the children that are not legally in this country? because our children are not benefiting.
I
Natasha,
would
let's
make
let-
sure you're, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, and then
I
will
would just
interrupt
make sure you vote accordingly. That's the only thing. Whoever you vote for has to have the same priorities.
I want to talk about this from a totally different point of view because you may not be aware. I taught middle school science, not in this state, but in a different state. And I don't care what kind of status a kid has. My job is to teach them science. I had an entire classroom full of children. I am not certified as an English as a second language teacher, but I had an entire classroom full of children that I could not communicate with because I don't speak Spanish. But I was still expected to try to teach these children standards, and as a teacher, you're held accountable for those students. So it's not only affecting students, it's affecting teachers because teachers are not able to do their jobs when they can't communicate with children, but they're expected to teach these children.
More questions? There's a question up in the back, Pat. Oh, there we go.
Hi, yes, I've been privileged to have breakfast many days with somebody who used to teach she taught for decades. And her main thing was that a lot of money was wasted on educational companies that came in to give seminars, and they vacuumed up all the money for education, all the extra money for education in a district. Is anybody else aware of this problem?
Melissa, would you like to speak to this at all as a school board chair because you're approving those budgets?
That absolutely does happen. It's working. Sorry. Nope.
It's not going to happen again.
Me and microphones. Can you hear me now?
We can,
Okay.
yes.
That absolutely does happen. And it's almost like the flavor of the year. Every year it comes to curriculum and to the board, a new program. I think, speaking for our district, I think we have 6 or 7 different phonics programs going on right now. But for example, there was an iReady test that was being done in the elementary schools a few years ago. And next thing you know, the iReady reading test, we had to buy thousands of iPads to put into the classroom. So absolutely, this is happening. They're meeting at conventions or something. There's a new program, and then you have to buy this new device and all of these different curriculum modules to put in every school. So it does happen. And for our board, it went through the curriculum committee, and our board members would decide if it was valid or not.
Neely, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I would say that successful students don't pay. And so what is the motivation behind some of these organizations that pop up in our communities, like in Forsyth County, where you can look at their board of directors and say, oh, they lead the nonprofit in after-school mentoring services, and they sit on the board of the summer camp services organization, and they're all sitting on each other's boards, and they're popping up these nonprofits. And if our children could read, and if they were proficient in math, and if they didn't need buddies, and if they, didn't need all these resources, they wouldn't be very lucrative. And we have a deep bench of nonprofit organizations in our county that run our school system. And I've kept tabs on every single one of those.
So
it is real.
Yeah, and I think it's important for everyone to understand that the unions actually spend more money in political activism and supporting these nonprofits than they actually do in supporting and advocating for their membership. When I talk about community schools, these are bringing in the community partners, all of these nonprofits to deliver services to the schools. So it's taxpayer-funded philanthropy. Oftentimes parents are not aware of what is being taught, the materials that are being given to students, the access that other adults have to your children when you're at school. That's a wonderful question to ask. Who besides my child's teacher is going to have access to them during the school year? And what you may find out is there's a life skills course that's being taught by a nonprofit in your community that you have no idea what's in that curriculum.
Not just that, but like the online media, like the online libraries. I mean, my son is in 3rd grade, and I have told him, if you run across something at school that you find to be inappropriate or not okay or makes you feel uncomfortable, puts off warning bells, let me know. Well, being the curious third grader, he took that as, oh, I need to go look for it. But anyway, he came back and he reported to me that he found all these books. And what I was like, why are you reading these? These are kindergarten level. You're in third grade. Is this assigned to a teacher? He goes, no, I was just looking around the thing. Well, all these books that were not appropriate were all kindergarten. And then I take it, we have a great school board. I take it to the school board and they have to go into this third party person. And so now we're like a week later because we have to deal with this person that's not even a part of our school district. And it's like, can we just get a decent library and call it done? I mean, where did the advice for screens go anyway? Like, we don't need these online. Give the kids a book, an age appropriate book, period.
Kenny, if someone could pass Kenny a microphone, that would be great. I'm going to just kind of play off of this for a second. The money that's being spent, I mean, there are companies that know that they can make a lot of money off of taxpayers by getting involved in education. Chairman Mao in China actually closed schools for 2 years and did a re-education program. We call that professional development in the United States of America now, where he actually re-educated teachers before they went back into the classroom. It's quite the grift that's going on, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you could call it grift. You could call it social indoctrination. Another thing Chairman Mao did was really funny. He would the middle schools in China, they would do as part of the re-education, they would move bricks from one end of the gym to the other end of the gym. And then when they're done moving it to the other end of the gym, they would take that brick and they would move it back to the same place in the gym. And that was called re-education. So if you think about some of these, everything, there's this, when you're thinking about how school boards fail, why we have such failing schools at the school board level, a lot of times it is because school board members have interests. They input their interests into the school board, and they don't consider student outcomes. There's this great book called by A.J. Crabill. It's called Why School Boards Fail. And most of it has to do with if you want to run a good school board, if you want to be a good school board administrator, you got to start off with what is the outcome, what is the goal that you want to get to? What X percentage of kids need to get proficient in math? X percentage of Black kids need to get proficient in English, etc. Make a goal, and then your entire meeting should revolve around that goal. That's not what happens at school boards these days. Instead, it's the school board members who are suggesting what they want to happen based on their own preferences, called adult inputs, their own connections, and then that's the agenda that eventually gets passed.
I'm sorry, is there one more comment?
Real quick, I know this is going to be a little bit touchy, but I want everyone to be aware of, in Union County, what we discovered is the Chamber of Commerce was, our particular Chamber of Commerce was doing an entire video, bringing in all of the different businesses, even from outside of Union County. They started a DEI committee, and most of the people on the DEI committee for Union County Chamber of Commerce did not even live in Union County, but they were going into our schools and having like career day or manufacturing day, all of these different opportunities for these people to get into our schools and to your children. And so as a new county commissioner, we decided to pull our membership from the Chamber of Commerce when we discovered that. And it has been extremely controversial. I don't know if all chambers are doing this, but that might be another way to get these businesses selling whatever they're selling into our classroom, and and having one-on-one time with our children while we're at work.
I'd like to say something. I'm sorry. I don't even like, but I'll use it. To what Kenny said earlier about organizations, non-government agencies, getting involved in your children's day-to-day life in school, but also for children who may not have a home family life. They donate these books to orphanages, and a lot of the books that are on our naughty book list, I guess you could call it, in book looks, were donated to students that, were in the orphanages or in a foster home. They will find a way to get these books and this material in front of your child, one way or the other.
We'll take one more question before we end today. Pat, you go ahead. Pick whoever you'd like.
I believe she had a question. Can you come just?
I was just going to piggyback off of.
Yeah,
this one.
yeah.
Okay, great.
Hi, my name's Caitlin Daly. I'm a Wake County mom. I'm kind of interested to know, you guys are talking about different organizations that are coming into the schools that are not directly associated with public schools. I know someone mentioned iReady. What kind of other organizations are trying to do that?
Planned Parenthood would be
Okay.
a key organization that would like to have more access to your children.
Okay. Are they coming in as Planned Parenthood? That's my question. Like, how do we know what the organizations are? They called by, do they go by Planned Parenthood, or do they go by a different name?
Yeah, I mean, I would ask the school what those extracurricular clubs are. What we would like to see is parental consent before a child can participate in them. But they know who's coming in.
I didn't ask about organizations though, like after school things. I'm asking specifically, like, are there organizations coming to present to the board or to public schools to get inside of public schools? If that makes sense.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Because there's a lot of groups coming into the schools during the school day, not just, right.
And it's going to be very local to your community. So we have local groups coming into Forsyth County schools that pop up to meet a need. So it'll be very specific to Wake County, for instance.
So-
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, no, so what I would suggest, no, yeah, absolutely. So you're in Wake County. What I would suggest that you do is write a letter to your superintendent and your school board members and say, I'm interested to know what nonprofits or other services are coming into our schools where a student may have access to an adult who isn't a staff member of the school. Ask that question. Ask them that. Can you tell me what, I'm sorry, I can't hear you because you don't have a microphone. I apologize.
So
Thank you very much.
They do a freedom of information or ask for, to see the sign in office.
And be specific about your child's school.
Well, if someone comes into your child's school, they have to sign in. So I think that would help.
Planned Parenthood is very open. Planned Parenthood is very open about their intentions.
Yes, when you have an adult that comes to your child's school, if you're a parent, you're going to write your name and you're going to write parent and where you're going. If you have other people that are coming into your school who are delivering services to your children or doing presentations, when they sign in to your child's school, you'll be able to see their name and you'll be able to see the organization that they're working with and representing. Specifically, when you write to your superintendent and your school board, you're going to want to work through your student services department. A lot of times, what we're seeing with a lot of these organizations is that they're not going through the school board. I think you've heard that a little bit tonight. My experience as a school board member has been that the nonprofits have found a lovely way to come into the schools through procedure. They work through student services. Again, the board doesn't have to approve these groups coming in, and they're meeting the needs of students. Oftentimes, they're being guided by what would be called technical guidance, being delivered by the federal government or the state. And sure. Your options as a parent would be to say, I'd like for my child to be opted out of any instruction that's not being delivered by the teacher or school staff. And what I'm suggesting
that's
to
kind of
you,
the problem, isn't it? If you don't know that they're there, that's the problem.
that was a wonderful question, though. Thank you very much for coming this evening. So I want to thank all of the members of our panel. I very much appreciate your activism, your role in helping to improve education in America. Courage is contagious. I promise you that if you are sitting in a room, if you are sitting at a school board meeting, and you're thinking that there's a problem or an issue, you are not the only person in that room that is thinking that. So I'd like for you to think about how you can get more involved in your community and have your voice heard. And if you hold up that torch of liberty, if you show people that it doesn't have to be like this, we don't have to accept that only a third of the children in the United States are reading on grade level.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you so much for coming this evening. We appreciate the fact that you've joined us. And the truth of the matter is that if we want to move our country forward, we need to work together. I want to thank Lisa Bowden, who is our event director, and Julie Bywater from our national team for helping to make this event so wonderful. I want to thank Charlie Messer, who is here, who's our National Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs. And here's what I'm going to promise you. We are going to get a chair and we are going to pull up a seat at every table as parents. And we are going to continue to advocate. We are just getting started, so buckle up. Go to momsforliberty.org to learn more. Thank you for joining us this evening.